love goes on, softly on. So don't be sighing or crying. Here live with our
All right, and welcome to another Lawyers, Guns, and Money podcast, which at this point we'll probably just rename the Scott and Steven Show, given the frequency of other podcasts. But yeah, we're just going to pick up where we left off rather abruptly at the end of the previous podcast. We started talking about religion, and by we, I mean Steven started talking about religion. And I, the editor, just cut him off because we would have gone way over the limit, and so I just put my foot down because I'm an asshole. So in order to make up to, up for that, I decided we should do a second podcast.
Yeah, we can call this like a podcast extra or something.
Yeah, bonus time with us. Aren't you happy to be here? All right, so Steven, why don't you take it away?
All right, so the topic of religious faith. I was listening recently to another podcast about Game of Thrones, in which Brian Kaufman, the author, was talking about his thoughts on the show that he had written, and he kind of said this is a very heavy Lord of Light episode for a reason, that they really wanted to emphasize that the religion of the Lord of Light, R'hllor, is not just about Melisandre as this one creepy figure, that it is something that has power in other places. What do you think of this? How the show's presented Melisandre so far? Would you agree that she's presented as a villain?
I initially, yes. Up until her last appearance on the show, I think she certainly was portrayed as a villain. And again, I think much like with Jaime, we're getting her become sympathetic much more quickly. Even though she was saying, "I'm off to go kill the Baratheon child," to Stannis when we saw her, she said so lovingly in a way, and then you combine that with how she was interacting, or how presumably she had interacted in the past with Stannis' wife. She seemed like a good sister wife. But nowhere near as vicious as she seemed in the novels.
Yeah, I mean, George R.R. Martin himself has called her his most misunderstood character, which I think is quite interesting. A lot of people in the fandom think that she's secretly working for the others, the White Walkers, which is just not true. She's very sincere about the Lord of Light. She's just kind of, manipulative in the way that a lot of evangelists are about their religion. So, what we see in this episode is different forms of belief that, Thoros and Beric especially, and the Brotherhood Without Banners in a larger sense, believe completely that the Lord of Light is real, that he has the power to show them the truth, because they've seen miracles. They can bring people back from the dead, they can turn blood into fire. And, these are two characters who are presented, one as kind of a lovable rogue, and the other as a very sort of straightforward hero. And that kind of changes the way that the fans will think about this religion, hopefully.
I think it will. Part of me wonders about what they're going to be doing going forward with the entire idea of witnessing. The fact that it's not just other characters who are giving witness to miracles. It's the audience. Either they're going to have to confirm them as legitimate at some point, or we're going to have the old, problem that every time a statue bleeds, or cries tears of blood, you know, it ends up being Hershey syrup, and the Catholic Church is made fun of. I mean, there's are these going to be real miracles? I guess is what I'm saying, because we get a sense that even with, oh no, that's spoilery. There are other indications that this magic might just be more misunderstood science. I'll leave it at that.
I mean, that's one possibility. Another possibility is that they're kind of going with this theme of, you know, 1,000 roads to heaven. That, you know, we've seen fairly explicitly. There is something magical to the old way. It has power in a sense. You know, Bran can see, you know, the future. Well,
oh wait, can we do
Jojen talked
spoilers?
about it.
Oh,
No,
okay.
Jojen talked about it. We're
Okay.
good on this.
Okay.
You know, that he can warg into the minds of animals, and these are all powers that are part of the old way, the old gods. What we haven't gotten that got introduced in the books by this point is whether or not there's any veracity to the drowned god. And because and this is not a spoiler, they've eliminated the character Patchface, which I think we're all kind of glad about because, you know, anyone who suffers from whichever phobia it is that is clowns would just absolutely lose it. But, you know, there's always been this question about the drowned god possibly also having the power to imbue his followers with the gift of prophecy. Interestingly, you know, in the books and in the show, the one religion that doesn't seem to have any kind of efficacy, any kind of proof, is the Faith of the Seven, which is the majority religion in Westeros.
Well, but that isn't really a. I mean, the Seven aren't considered gods so much. Great figures in history. It seems more like Roman ancestor worship than it does actual divinities.
No. They're very clearly divinities in a Trinitarian sense. They are seven faces of the one God.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you start naming them out.
Baelor is like an ancestor spirit. No, you're thinking of Brandon.
Brandon built the wall, yeah.
Targaryen. Yeah, Baelor was the Targaryen king who created this firm alliance between the monarchy and the Faith of the Seven, and supposedly, actually, he's
was
a
the
rare
wisest
example.
and he was the one whose statue that Arya stood on while watching Ned's execution, for the irony.
Yeah, and if you like blink and you'll miss it little moment, I think it was last episode when Joffrey and Marjorie were in the Sept of Baelor, they redid the statue.
I did not notice.
It's like a really quick shot to outside, but like the statue that in season 1 was this kind of weather-beaten stone is now this very glorious kind of Michelangelo-esque, you know, heroic male in marble. So, you know, getting back on topic for a second, you know, the Arya's second scene with them is kind of interesting because the danger with having real divinity or magic of any kind is you have to have a consistent set of rules in order to maintain a sense of you know, narrative stakes, right? If you know, anything can be solved by inventing a new spell that Harry hadn't known about 5 minutes previously, then you don't ever have that sense of real tension. Whereas here we see there is a cost to resurrection, that Beric is coming back less each time. And I'm kind of curious to see, I mean, in the books it's more explicitly memory that he's losing. He's losing his past. He's losing the things that made him a human being. He's almost literally being born again in the faith, as it were. But, you know, and there are limits to what can be achieved, that, you know, he comes back, but he doesn't come back whole. You know, he's got the marks of his deaths all over him. And then there's this question about, well, what would it mean to bring back Ned Stark, even if you could?
Well, they sort of make it clear that it is simply too late for Ned, that there are some injuries in some manners, and it was a very Highlander moment. Like, he could have come back had it been anything else.
Only be one.
Yeah, you cut off his head, and that's it. But I don't know if I believe him when he says that he comes back a little less every time. I mean, I don't know to what he's actually referring when he says that. I mean, he says memories, I forget things, but he doesn't seem to actually forget things. He seems to have his wits about him.
I mean, in the books he's pretty explicitly about. I mean, yes, he has his wits about him. He he doesn't forget how to use a sword. He doesn't forget his name, things like that. But he says, I can't remember the castle that I was a lord of. I can't remember the name of the woman that I was engaged to be married to, or what she looks like. I can't remember my favorite food. He's keeping all of the things that allow him to be a soldier for the Lord of Light, but he's losing the things that make him human.
And which is sort of your typical Christian idea of sacrifice, that you give up your connection to the world for a higher purpose. And I see the appeal of that. I still don't know what to make of him, though, in terms of and part of this is because I took a class years and years ago on memory and narrative, and one of the things that we studied was the relationship between what's retained and what's lost. So we read a lot of sort of Russian psychiatrists who were dealing with head trauma. I ended up doing a lot of work with Silas Bohr Mitchell in my dissertation on head trauma and memory. And one of the things that sort of bothers me about selective memory loss, that you can give up certain parts of it in exchange for the keeping of others. It's a sort of internal mental economy that doesn't work for me in a narrative sense. It seems too easy. These are the things I would give up in order to have, and it might just be that I grew up, reading comic books, and so I've seen this done with so many X-Men so many times, be it Wolverine or Jean Grey, or that they're willing to, or hell, all of the X-Men when they go to Australia in issue 246 or whatever it is. I'm sure someone on the internet will correct me. I think it's 236, 246 after they fight the Brood.
I have it on my hard drive. I could check.
Well, it's not that important. Someone will do it for us.
All right.
You people. I just said you weren't important. But there's a certain cheapness to that. It's, how do I put this? It's easy martyrdom, I guess would be the best way to put it. To be able to lose yourself yet remain alive and serve the cause, as opposed to actually having to sacrifice your life. You don't. You just have to sacrifice your memory of it. Everyone else is fine.
Well, I mean, I think that gets to the question of what is life, and what is life worth. Remember, Drogo was brought back from the dead, but the only parts of him that came back were basically the brainstem, right? Autonomic breathing, blinking functions, and what was lost was his identity, his humanity. And in terms of like what the total sacrifice is, I think that's to be determined within the show. So moving on, you mentioned this idea of rejecting normal human stuff in favor of a higher power, and I think Solis kind of shows this more troubling side of the Lord of Light. That here is someone who has rejected the normal dictates of family in favor of complete fanaticism. That, you would expect, even in the most, strong and tolerant family, that, your husband cheating on you would at the very least, generate some kind of resentment, some kind of anger. And, she says, I rejoiced in it. She goes 180 degrees and comes up with this statement that, honestly could be the motto of any fundamentalist, no act in the service of God is a sin. And that is a scary face of faith.
And it certainly is, especially a faith that, for whatever reason, has also led her to abandon her daughter. And it's a very selfish faith. But then again, what choice has Stannis given her? I mean, in a way, it's a very sort of pathetic capitulation to circumstance. She can't do anything about the fact that Stannis has hitched his wagon, to Melisandre and her Lord of Light, and his ability to win the war. She can't. I mean, there's nothing she could do about that, right? So there's almost a kind of resignation to, if my husband.
Except that it correction, which is that Selyse is the one who introduced Stannis to this Red God.
Well, and there are many accounts of many people whose relationships began when a man introduced another man to his girlfriend, and yes, that was the introduction, but who ended up getting married? I mean, there are the only wrinkle there is that I guess, everyone's still in love. I guess
the thing that kind of it's never spelled out why Selyse chose this new faith. Because, it is a radical action, to not only change your religion, but to change it to one that is, within the context of the series, foreign. And here it seems to be placed within the context of she's lost her sons. This paradigmatic role of a highborn woman in this society, she views as having completely failed. She has 3 dead sons. She's clearly not over that fact because she keeps them in jars, in the room with her, and talks to them. And she clearly views her daughter as a failure as well. And that she's sort of turned to this religion that can offer miracles of some form, I think in the hopes that Stannis will have a son, that in some way her failure can be redeemed.
Which just sounds like a very kind of typical retreat into religion when the world fails you.
Right.
You need for the world to make sense, and if it refuses to make sense, I'm going to choose to believe in a faith where I don't know people come back from the dead. Although, unlike Christians, she has an advantage in that she's actually seen people come back from the dead. So there's a sort of veracity to her belief. That
Selyse hasn't.
Oh, she hasn't?
No, I mean, what she's seen is that, Melisandre can survive being poisoned, that she can see the future. Let me see, what else? That she can kill anybody by bringing forth these
shadow
babies, which, like with resurrection, kind of we could almost call it the shadow of resurrection. It's something that has a cost and it has limits. That, as Melisandre says in her goodbye to Stannis, I've taken something from you in creating this child. I've taken some of your life force and sacrificed it. And one of the things that we haven't yet touched on about the faith is that Relorism, at least the variant that Melisandre believes in, is all about sacrifices, in service of a god.
Well, one interesting thing in terms of why Selyse would be attracted to Melisandre, in an odd way, there is a way they could be sympathetic with each other in that they both take in Stannis' seed, and produce death.
Right.
Right. I mean, they both pervert the normal idea of what's supposed to happen when the egg meets the seed and they have a party.
Yeah,
I mean,
that was strange when Celeste said that Melisandre has given you a son, and I'm sort of thinking, well, sons are supposed to stick around and inherit land.
Yeah, no,
You
not
know,
hers. I mean, her experience with sons has been entirely, no, that's what happens. You give birth to them, they die.
Right.
It's just Melisandre's have served a purpose other than just to die. You know, and again, cruel gods give you children just to kill them, just so you'll have more faith in God.
Yeah. And that's I'm not going to spoil anything, but just a word to the viewers: pay attention to this question of sacrifice and faith. It's going to come up again. And the last thing I had under faith is the kind of the nice human flip side to these rather creepy scenes in Dragonstone is Shireen and her faith in human beings, and in the written word, and I guess in a sense in hope.
Yeah, I don't know. I just started thinking about this, but one other interesting thing about, I mean, and sort of without getting into like theological thought, which I haven't studied in depth in years, but there is the old divide between faith and ritual, and that for Christians faith is paramount, whereas for Jews it's all about the ritual. There's a
orthodoxy and orthopraxy,
the whole the Talmudic notion that the idea isn't to spend your whole life looking at the sky worshiping God because you'll trip. The whole idea is to spend your life looking at the ground, picking up the stones, which are mitzvahs. And if you just get to the end of your life with a shitload of stones, you've done a lot of good.
Yeah.
And so the idea of ritual is important, because I think this is where Arya is getting separated from the entire rest of the conversation we've had. This is the first time in a while we've heard her say her prayer. And her prayer is both a ritual and not a prayer at all, because she's just memorizing. She's like a student, with the periodic, the chart of periodic elements. She's not trying to...
what it reminds me of? It's Leonard in Memento.
Yeah. Except I think she has mental injury that's gonna make her forget the way.
No, she does. Well, she's not. Her problem isn't forgetting, but it's more she's making an insistent promise, in a sense, that she's not going to forget the emotional or moral significance of these names. That she like, in a way, Rickard Karstark, she insists on the immediacy of vengeance.
Oh, what happened? Can you hear me?
I lost a sentence there. What'd you?
Okay,
I can hear you.
Okay,
Did
I don't
you
know
say
what
something?
happened. No, I heard a ding. I don't know why. I was just trying to look something up online while we were doing this, which is the here we go. Oh, come on. I just need the passage. Hold on 1 second. This will be edited out. Come on. My computer is going incredibly slow because of... okay, so... and we'll resume. Okay, so... in terms of what... can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of what Arya was doing, what it reminds me most of isn't just a list she's reminding herself of who she's going to kill, because I don't think there's any chance she's going to forget. I think it's part of her coming-of-age story, of her identity and she's trying to find her place in the world. And so the thing that sort of pops to mind every time she says this prayer now is the what Stephen Daedalus writes in his book when he gets to his school, and he right on the flyleaf he writes Stephen Daedalus, beneath that class of elements, beneath that Wood College, County Kildare, Ireland, Europe, the world, the universe. It's a child's way of understanding their place in the world. Except instead of being a physical location as it is for Daedalus, for Arya, it's a list. She is, and she belongs to these people that she's going to be killing. That's the only thing that gives her life any meaning, which is why I think she lashes out as she does when the Hound is released. She can't understand that, because for her to understand
when justice is not done.
Yeah. So it's all about the ritual, her own ritual placement of herself in society. So all this stuff about Lord of Light and that, I think she just could care less, or could not care less. Whichever one is correct, please.
I think it's it's useless to her in the sense that, like, if it can't bring back her father and it can't kill someone who needs killing, then this god is not particularly useful to her. And in terms of what it means to pray for death, all I'll say is that we should do another like religion extra whenever they get to this part in the books, which would probably be, I'm going to say, sometime in season 4, season 5, maybe?
Yeah. But in terms of at least how her prayer, and I think that's just like I've now convinced myself that's the worst thing we could call it. Her nightly recitation. How it relates to her as a character is that it's all she is at this point. She's losing all of her friends. She's about to be sort of cut loose. All she is are the people she's going to kill. In the same way that all Stephen Daedalus is this little shit that he can kind of telescope out to the universe.
With the exception that, I think the one thing that is delaying this process for her at the moment is that she still has family, right? When Jaqen H'ghar gives her the option to come with me, join this society that I'm a part of, she says, I can't yet. It's very interesting that she says yet. That as long as she has family, Arya Stark has an identity somewhat beyond her list.
And she has external validation of that identity, and we got that nicely 2 episodes ago. When the Hound arrived and said, "What are you doing with the Stark bitch?" I mean, there is that sort of external identity. I don't know if she knows what she is anymore, and I sort of wonder how dark they're going to take her, because they know that the audience is inclined to sympathize with Arya above almost any other character. So they know that they can push her and the way that they depict her a lot further than they can anyone else. I mean, they're walking a tightrope with Cersei. If Cersei, for the most part, if she does one more shitty thing, she's going to become irredeemable. And they obviously don't want that for reasons we can talk about in a couple of years.
Well, and they've choked back really hard on Cersei compared to the books.
Yeah.
In the books, the whole kind of Herod-esque murder of the bastards in the premiere of season 2, that was her idea. That was not Joffrey. So they've clearly decided that for whatever reason, they don't want to quite follow George R. R. Martin in in who Cersei is.
I think it's pretty obvious that the reason is that with American culture being what it is, and women in American culture depicted as they are, there's only so far you can push a female character before they can never become sympathetic again. You can only break them. And what I mean, an interesting corollary would be, especially given that it's a sort of different character who was sympathetic for a long time, but Buffy never recovered from season 6. The character of Buffy Summers never recovers from being a complete bitch after she comes back from the dead. Like, she never becomes that sympathetic character again, and no matter how hard they tried to make her as much, it failed. And I think that's why I said I think they really have a tightrope with Circe, because it really is. She does one more thing, and there's no coming back. There's no way anyone will ever like her again. How much supplication? What could she do to earn our good graces again? And
well,
it's different in the books, but
yeah, it's different in the books, and the interesting question is, and I think this has to do with the nature of misogyny in culture at the moment.
Yeah,
is I think by episode 5, by this point, most people have come to sympathize with Jamie. There's a minority that still says, well, they pushed a 10-year-old off a tower.
Again, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, whereas Circe.
The other thing is that
a whole lot in this series so far, besides
but she is much more closely affiliated with Joffrey than Jamie is, and that is going to become an untenable position shortly.
Yeah.
Yes, or something. I don't know. No, Joffrey's a dragon. I don't know. I run into spoilers sometimes, and I don't know what to say other than stopping. Was there anything else you wanted to?
No, that's pretty much it.
All right. Well, with the exception of my little typing debacle in the middle of it, I think this went really well. I hope all of you enjoyed our special religion podcast. I feel weird saying that, given that I normally just laugh at religion. But I'm just gonna edit all this shit out. Let's hold on. Let me take a 5-second break, and then we'll just say goodbye, and then I'll just edit out like the past 30 seconds.
Okay.
All right, and it's been another Lawyers, Guns, and Money podcast. We were talking about religion. If you have any issue with the show that you would like us to discuss, feel free to leave us a comment on our YouTube page or at lawyersgunsandmoneyblog.com, or send either of us an email, and we would be more than happy to try to address it as seriously as we possibly can. But if you ask me to, no, I won't even say that. We will try as seriously as we possibly can. We'll have a special issue on pornography next week. No, okay. All right, but it's been great. I will talk to you later. And